All right, ladies and
What?
gentlemen, we are here with my hero, Brett Vaughn. Brett, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing fine. Fine. Thank you.
If folks that don't know, because I am going to get a lot of coon hunters that listen to this, but Born 100 Years Too Late, that is your YouTube channel. That's where I first heard of you, because I'm going through the computer and I'm, typing in hounds and hunting dogs and whatever. I never did mules, but there's this here's this guy with his hounds and a mule, and I thought it was pretty cool, and I've been following you for quite a while. But yeah, I appreciate you sitting down here with me, Brett. And I called you this morning. You said that you had a lion track going. How'd that go?
I think we were backwards on it.
Really?
Uh, we started it down low and probably not. I'd caught an old female lion, probably not 300 yards from where we started this. And I never could find a track. And of course, I'm hunting in the dirt and I'm not on my mule, I'm on foot. And they take off and of course it's lion hunting in the dirt, so it's kind of slow going anyway,
Yeah.
and they're just trailing up through this old rough canyon into some bluffs, and I keep going with them, keep hoping I'll find a track. And something I got to thinking about while I was out there doing it. I thought, there's so many variables that you have to pay attention to when you're doing this, because they trailed up into a protected kind of a shady canyon with a lot of
Mhm.
rock, and they had started it down below, and they started it in some greasewood and kind of dirt. And when they got up there in that better country, probably 500 or 600 yards from where we started, it just kept slowing down. And I just thought, no, we got to be backwards on it. But then then you also think about what, I was hunting with a real good dry ground lion hunter, and we got up in a bluff and we just sat and watched the dogs, and I kept wanting to move the dogs, and he kept saying, no, no, wait. They weren't even opening up or anything. They were just kind of milling
Yeah.
around up there on the mountain. He kept telling me, no, no, let's just wait. Let's just wait. Just sit here and wait and watch, wait and watch. And I mean, it was 45 minutes. And then all of a sudden, bam, there was a lion on a rock. And I thought,
Really?
golly, how many times have I been impatient and thought, oh, we need to move somewhere else. Oh, we need to move those dogs into a saddle somewhere else. And there was a lion just hiding in there. So yeah, just keep trying to learn.
It's got to be pretty difficult to tell the difference between going backwards and them and dry ground stuff. The dog's just hitting a rough patch, that peters out, the scent starts to get rougher, everything gets redder. And to me, it would look like a backwards track, but I wonder how often it actually is.
Ah, I'll go with what Warner Glenn said. He said, my dogs trail them as good backwards as they do forwards. And he said, sometimes I think backwards better. They're going backwards most of the time. And if you read like Steve Smith is another, he's in the same group as like Warner Glenn. He can kind of he says if you're trailing backwards and they lose, let's see, make sure I get this right. They'll turn a bobcat track around, but they won't hardly turn a lion track around. So if they turn a bobcat track, if they turn the track around on their own, then he thinks that they're what would he would consider trash. They're trashing on a bobcat.
Really?
So yeah, yeah,
Huh. Let me tell her. I learn all
yeah.
kinds of stuff.
Oh, and I look back and think about when I started, and I thought, man, how dumb I was, and still
I
dumb.
wonder it. I say, I wonder if in 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to look back to today and be like, what on earth was I thinking that time?
Oh, I can look back on yesterday and think, why in the world did you do that? Or why did you let
Oh,
those dogs do that? Did you really, because I think what's really hard is foxes, and I've talked to a lot of guys. Some guys don't worry about foxes, and some guys, said, no, you got to break your dogs off foxes. And I think I've trailed my share of foxes thinking they were lions.
yeah. You guys got grays or reds out there?
Grays.
Gray. So they will tree. A
Yeah,
gray will,
yeah,
right? Yeah. So we
yeah.
don't
I've
have any
treated.
grays. We got very few reds and no gray, zero gray.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, well, our dogs, sometimes it's a fox. Ours are different. if they run trash for a while, we don't care. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal. If they want to run a fox for a while or a coyote or a deer and they want to fall off on a hot coon, we got enough coon tracks around. But you guys, they can run a bobcat or anything for a long time before they run across the hot lion track. So you guys got to
Yeah.
kind of keep them focused.
And I go back and forth with it. There was a period of time when I said, yeah, it's no big deal running a fox every now and then. They don't go that far, and it, at least they're running something. Where I hunt out here in this old desert, our lion density is not very high, and the trailing conditions are terrible at best. And I've been kind of lazy. I don't load up and go into better country and so if they ran a fox every now and then, at least they were trailing something. But gosh darn it, then you get to thinking, well, you've spent 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes messing around with this fox here when you could have been going further down the road or the trail and hitting a good lion track. You're wasting
Yeah.
time. So I know lots of guys, they really get after their dogs for running fox.
I know, we go down to Texas and our dogs are bumping hogs, or every now and then they're running deer, or they're doing dog stuff. And I still like to listen to a good race, you know, um, a good coyote race out here in the middle of the night in a cold, January night. To listen to two really talented track dogs run a coyote, it's fun. I mean, them
That's
dogs, I
good.
know they're not supposed to be running a coyote, but they got them great big hound mouths and they're floating through the country and they're making big circles and they're doing a good job. And they usually don't run them all night. If they did run them all night, we'd have to put a stop to it. But when there ain't nothing else going on, I'm kind of in the boat that, that's kind of a good race to
Uh,
listen to.
well, that's what I always say. I get a little trashy sometimes too. I don't want to listen to
Yeah.
it. And sometimes when you get one of those little foxes going down in a canyon or something where it's, conditions are pretty good and they got him up and going and he's doing his little tricks, turning here and there and whatever, and you listen to those dogs, it's a lot of fun, really. It's good
Yeah.
listening. The problem, a lot of times in that rim country, you get up there on that rock and they'll trail that fox, and that fox they're not pushing him where he has to really run and get out of their way. He'll run a little ways and stop, and run a little ways and stop. And they're cold trailing, and it's like cold
Yeah.
trailing a lion, and
Yeah.
and that's that wastes a lot of time, right there. And I know that, and something else I found that those dogs will do is they'll cold trail a dang old coyote, and that coyotes, javelina, and deer are absolute no nos.
Yeah.
I don't
It,
I will break them.
I can understand the deer, and there are our deer. Like we have so many deer. For
Hmm.
every 100 yards that dog travels, he's going to cross a pretty good deer track. And but our hounds, they've got so much tree bred into them that they're just not. Normally, they never make it an issue. It's just not going to be a problem. But
Hmm.
you get a dog that really wants to trail, and then when our trailing conditions are really good, uh, sometimes them young dogs they'll really bust out of there on a deer, and we will stop that. If it gets to be a problem. But sometimes when it's cold like
Hmm.
this and you want to hear a hound race, the one race is no different than the other on occasion either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I've treed some foxes and I've treed some bobcats, but I think out here sometimes the bobcat, is the same category as a fox. It's nice when you tree one, but you can sure waste a lot of time on them and never have a chance of getting one caught in this desert.
do you guys have
And
a lot of
I
bobcats?
No, not a lot, but we
Yeah.
have enough. I mean, there's trap. I used to help a trapper that, he made his living trapping bobcats in this
Hmm.
country. Now he had a big area, and our bobcats are, they're big white spotted bellies. They
Yeah.
at one time they're worth quite a bit of money. They're not like the cats they have down in South Texas that really aren't worth anything. These are
Yeah.
these are valuable.
Yeah. No, I get them. I mean, we had the last year I trapped for bobcats, I think, because I enjoy trapping, and
Hmm.
I'll do it when the coon prices are high because we have so many coons that you're not going to keep them all out of your sets, and you're going to have to skin a bunch of coons if you're going to put any steel on the ground whatsoever. And so I
Yeah.
don't trap, unless the coons are pretty high. But I think that last year on bobcats, I averaged 100. $30, $140 a piece. And so,
Wow.
you catch three or four of them a week. It pays your gas, pays your trap bill,
Yeah.
and pays all that stuff. So, it's at least it's worth it.
Yeah. We've had, I forget the year now, but I mean, they were getting a big, big white spotted belly would bring 400 or 500 bucks.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that
I think
you
that was
trap.
2013 is when that went boom and
Yeah.
bust there in that year. Because I know I averaged 30 or 23.50, I think, on my coons, and I never fleshed them or stretched them or anything because I was worried about the price going down. So I sold them every Tuesday. I would
Really?
skin coons. Yeah, I would skin coons in the parking lot of the fur buyer that I'd caught on the way there. I had traps set on the way there, and after I got done running them, I would skin them right there in the parking lot and run them into the fur buyer, and he would buy them. And I was lucky I did because my buddies that shipped to Canada that year, I think they averaged 14, and only about 60% of their coons even sold.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So
so I got lucky. The fur buyer went out of business, but I got lucky.
he, he lost it, but you made it.
Yeah, he did. He lost a bunch of money.
Well, you're
But
just
Brett,
on top of it.
yeah, when did you get started doing this? Just doing the whole hound thing? Because not only for folks that don't know, and I like your stories YouTube channel the most. I like to sit down and watch that more than
Mhm.
anything. But you've been a content creator for a while, but you've been obviously in hounds a long time. And you're not just a hunter, but you're kind of a historian and you're a content creator and stuff. What got you started in all this?
Well, I mean, years and years ago, I mean, when I was just a kid, my dad had a construction yard in town in Albuquerque in town, and he brought me home a puppy, and it was a little curly-haired, black and tan looking dog. And my grandpa told me, he said, "Oh, that's an Airedale." And I said, "An Airedale?" And he said, "Yeah, they're bear dogs." And I said, "Bear dogs?" And and in my mind, I can still remember it. I remember thinking, you can hunt bears with dogs, because no one in our family did that. And then I got, one thing led to another. And of course, I'd heard where the red fern grows, just like all of us,
Yeah,
and fifth grade, trying to cover up crying at our desk,
yeah,
and I just got to Elliot Barker and the Dogs Bark Treat up in northern New Mexico. He used a couple of Airedales, and I got into all that, and I bought some Airedales and I messed around with it for a while, and of course I didn't know any different. I just I was kind of stuck on that because that's what I'd been told. And after I got older. Hold, can you pause this for just a second?
yeah, yeah. You're fine.
Sorry.
Nope, you're
I don't
good.
want I don't want that to carry on here.
That's what you're fine. I can't even hear it.
Uh, it again or
Yep, we're good. Go ahead, Brett.
anyway, so I messed around with them for a while and started hearing about the lion hunters, and the bear. Well, of course, Mike Root was up above here and better known as a lion hunter, but he caught lots of bears. And when I heard about him, heard about Ross Johnson, I went up and met Ross Johnson. Matter of fact, Ross Johnson was on the place that I ended up buying, years later. And of course, we didn't have the internet or didn't have any way, everything I learned was just from word of mouth. And
What year was that?
that had to be about 80, 84, 83,
Yeah.
84, something like that. And heard about Henry. Oh, then later on, I kind of started my own business and I got pretty broke. And I was down in Texas and I got to meet Henry McIntyre. And of course, that was an experience that it probably, changed the way I looked at things as much as anything, as anybody, just because I asked Henry, I said, "Henry, how do you hunt lions? How do you hunt lions with dogs?" And he said, "I take good dogs into good lion country and I make big circles on my mule." And I thought, man, that sounds like fun. And
Sounds
that's
easy
kind of,
too, the way he says it.
yeah, anyway, I never know, I never would have thought it'd be that hard. But
Yeah.
so it kind of stuck with me, and I thought, those old guys, the way they hunt, it kind of fascinated me anyway. And then then different things happened. I remember Henry had he had lions in cages back then, and and I'd heard some things later on about what they were doing, but he had, I mean, lions in cages back there, and had a big old stack of horns back there. And of course, I was broke, And I seen those horns, and I said, "What do you do with those horns?" He said, "I'll let you haul them off." He said, "You can have them if you'll haul them off for me." So I don't know what they were doing, but I hauled a pickup load of horns back home, and then sold them at the flea market to some trader up there. I didn't set up a table or anything with some
Yeah,
traders up there, and I'd take him, 4 or 5 horns, and he'd give me $3 or $4 for them, and I'd have gas money. I don't know. And then later on, after trying to figure out how I learned about the hounds and started, it had to be around 2001 or maybe the late 90s, something like that. I had greyhounds, or not greyhounds, we called them stag hounds,
yeah.
big hairy dogs, and I ran coyotes with them. And I caught a lion with them, back. We don't have a lot of open country here, so it's kind of hard to run those coyotes, and
Yeah.
I couldn't do it the way they did, the way they do back further east, Oklahoma and the Panhandle and all that country. So I got where I was calling in the coyotes and letting those dogs run them after I called them in, and those dogs got real smart about it. And then I started doing it on horseback, and calling them in, and we'd run them. It was a lot of fun, And of course,
That sounds
I
fun.
yeah, it was fun. I and
Yeah.
and I was kind of wild at that time. I was going through a divorce and everything, so
Yeah.
we we were having a ball out there. Just I didn't
It
have
was the
any money.
Wild West, literally.
Yeah, and I didn't have any money then either, so
Yeah.
it was a cheap entertainment, And I ended up catching that lion out there in the desert with those dogs. I got a video on my YouTube channel of that, and I was messing around with video at that time. This was way before YouTube or Facebook or
Yeah.
anything like that. And I there was a guy over in Arizona, Dave Carlson. Do you ever hear of Dave Carlson?
I don't think so.
He uh he trained dogs for people, and he was a lion hunter, and he
Yeah.
sold dogs and did this and that, and he would do report cards on dogs, and he would video 'em. He'd take a dog in, train it, and he'd video it, and then he called them these report cards. And then back before Facebook or YouTube, he had a website, but you could buy these videos, these report cards of his dogs. And this guy was an absolute character on his videos. I mean, he could cuss a blue streak and just dropping F bombs and everything. He was just something else. He was just who he was. And he was fun to listen to. And that was another thing that kind of led to me to making videos is what I bought his and I watched them. And
Yeah.
it was really entertaining.
When you made your first video, uh, was there an idea in mind that one day I'm going to have a successful YouTube channel, or was it, I'm just going to play with this thing. It looks like it's fun to do. Let's give it a shot.
Well, well, when I made the lion hunt, when I caught the lion with the dogs, I was pretending like I was like some kind of TV guy,
Yeah.
and I was. If you ever watch that video, you can just say, I don't know. It's I don't know what I didn't. I At that time I didn't plan on anybody ever seeing that thing, And then
Yeah.
I caught the lion and then I thought, well, I got to figure out a way to share this, and I made it, and I think I don't even remember if I emailed it. I can't remember. I sent it to some people. But later on, when I lived off grid up there, I bought that place way up in the mountains, and I had hounds. I'd already got into hounds, and I had my business going at that time, and I had some people working for me that were really smart, and I didn't have to be right there to manage them. I could make a phone call every
Mhm.
day and come in once a week, and see them. And I'd call my wife and tell my wife with these stories about you know what happened that day, where I went and this and that. And she told me, she said, well, you should keep a diary. And and I got a whole stack of these things here, these diaries I bought, that the year, on them and everything. And I'd write for like 3 or 4 days, and then I'd get lazy and I wouldn't write
Yeah.
anymore. But I would pick up a camera and I would talk to that camera, and started out, just saying, well, today's January 15th. I'm taking, Solo and Blackie and Super Hoover up here in this ridge, and we're going to see if that Tom line come through or whatever, and most of the time it was just, and it wasn't meant for anybody else, just for me to kind of document what I was doing.
Hmm.
And also I was living off grid that time, and I was trying to learn about, solar systems and different things like that. And that was right when YouTube had started. And I got on YouTube and I started learning about that. And I seen these guys making all these videos, and I thought, well, shoot, I ought to try to do that. So I started trying to learn how to edit and
Yeah.
everything. one thing led to another, and so yeah, that's kind of how all that got started. And you get into it. I mean, you've made some videos and stuff. You kind
Yeah.
of get into it, and you kind of try to learn how to tell a better story and how to make it entertaining for people. So
You're
that's
kind
kind of
of you're kind of an enigma in that, to me, Brett Vaughn don't want, a bunch of folks around him. He wants to be in the hills with his dogs and his mule.
yeah.
And we all get that. I'm that way too. And here I am doing the same thing, But we end up, you end up the camera's with you, and it's kind of almost like another human being there. It gives you something to talk to, something to converse with. And you still, even though guys like us want to be alone with our dogs and stuff, we still want to express ourselves to people too. And so do you think that maybe that camera was a little bit of a tool to help you along when when you're up there in the mountains all by yourself?
Yeah, it's I you know it's a strange thing because I don't do anything social. I mean, I
Yeah.
go to church every now and then, and then like tomorrow morning, I take my dad to a little Bible study, and but other than that, I don't go to parties. I don't and I hunt almost all the time by myself. And after I've learned YouTube and I've started studying a little bit more, there's a lot of the better YouTubers or the people are what they call them introverts. We're
Yeah.
introverts. We're
Yeah.
we're we're just as happy being by ourselves as we are with any as being with anybody. And I have no idea why it'd be so easy for people like us that are introverts to use a camera and I mean, well, you've seen the videos. I can talk to a camera just like it's like
Yeah.
somebody sitting there. And I don't know. I have no idea why it is that way, but it is. It's just the way it is.
Strangely enough, some of the better podcasters are introverts too, and they're good conversationalists. But I think a lot of that knack is the fact that they don't want to talk about themselves. They want to talk
Hmm.
about their guest or learn things from their guest or glean things because you know, you know, I'm enjoying sitting here visiting with Brett Vaughn right now, but there's still that gap in between us. You're not.
Hmm.
It ain't like we're sitting here face to face. A lot of that too, but so yeah, it's a weird dynamic, especially for
It is.
you. That I can tell that a guy that just would rather be out in the hills with his mule and his dogs, and here you are, and you've done really well, especially the last. I want to say what, Brett, the last 2 years, it seems like your stuff has just really exploded, and I'm enjoying watching it.
Yeah, I went and I got consulted, and I consulted with a guy who, and at the urging of my wife said, she said, if you're going to do this, you might as well learn how to do it right. And I talked to this guy that's a real well-known YouTube consultant, costs some money, but and he made so much sense to me. He
Yeah,
said, he said you're making these videos and you're titling them lion hunting this and that or whatever. He said there's just a small group of people in the world who are even interested in that would even think about clicking. He said, well, why don't you try to figure out how you can broaden your audience? He said, and what would be of interest to a broader audience? And there's some things that I thought about. I said, well, I always have a destination, and what's the story about that destination? And if there's some kind of historical value to the where I'm going or some kind of story about that, then share that. And he said,
yeah,
you're still hunting lions, but you're making it to a broader audience. And what after I started doing that, what I've noticed through the comments and through talking to people, I got one video, it's got 400,000 views. And I think because when I'm out there, if you watch my videos, of course my old mule passed away, but my mule's my partner. She's just like someone else out there with me. I
yeah.
take good care of her, and people see that, and then they see how I interact with my dogs, and how we're all a group out there, and we communicate with each other, and I think that maybe in the long run, by people seeing that, they say, "Oh man, instead of just seeing a bunch of dogs barking at the bottom of a tree and some guy shooting a lion out, they get to see more of what we're doing and
Yeah.
and how we're not just a bunch of bloodthirsty killers out there trying to kill everything, and it's not just a bunch of screaming, crapping dogs that you drop and they go taking off running, and you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people have the wrong impression, and I think maybe, hopefully that through what I'm doing and hitting a broader audience, then they'll see, more of what it's really like, how we really care about our animals, and
Well,
then it's not
there's
something bad.
there's like I was getting ready to say it before you touched on it, but there's such benefits from, little things like title changes and little things that or you're trying to improve your or broaden your audience because the whole goal for me has always been let's get hound hunting mainstream. I don't care if it's eastern coons or it's western lions or
Hmm.
northern bear or whatever,
Hmm.
because probably more than I do about how the people are so unique and everybody in these hound sports are a throwback to, especially out there where you're at, even to a bigger extent. And I think of places like Appalachia and the Ozarks, how they are a throwback to a different time. Still,
Yes.
those stereotypes still exist. That Southern hillbilly that just comes out of the hills with his dogs every now and then. They're there. I know them. They're friends of mine. That Western lion guy that you see come into town with his old truck pulling a stock trailer and a mule, and he's got a whole thing full of dogs that you may only see once every 3 or 4 months when he comes to town to get some provisions of some sort. Those people exist, and
Yeah. Yeah.
not the world thinks they're only in movies, and
No.
and they're actual people, and
Yeah.
they're not going to do it themselves. They don't want any attention. They don't want any clamor. They just want to be out there with their dogs and their peaceful state of mind and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of a responsibility for some hound hunters like yourself and me to bring that to people and let them know that
Yeah.
we're just folks that love what we do.
Yeah. And those guys you're talking about, those are the guys who fascinated me. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
give up
Mm-hmm.
so much in their life just to pursue, their hounds and lions, or
Yeah.
like you're talking about the coon hunters back there, that they have they gave it all up just to do that,
Yeah.
and they live that life, and they don't. I'm a pretender. I mean, I go out and I try to hunt like they do, and I try to when I'm out there, but I cheated. I had a business and I made money and I did things.
Yeah.
These guys lived like church mice, and
Yeah.
they didn't care, and they did what they wanted to do, 7 days a week, and those are the guys, and that's why I did the interview stories and tales YouTube channel. It's like a passion project of mine because I've got, of course, I just got through went over and spent some time with Warner Glenn, and I got to sit down and interview him, and then Johnny Clump. Of course, Johnny Clump's not a lot older than me, but he's an old rancher, been out there in that country. So, he caught a jaguar back
Yeah.
before, I think it was before Warner Glenn did, and of course he got in a little trouble about it. But those guys fascinated me. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just they lived a different life and they didn't give in to what to pursuing the dollar, I guess is what it amounts to.
Yeah. And you're right about, and I thought of Keith Sutmiller. That's a man I just went down and visited, and I squirrel hunted with him. He's down in Oklahoma, and I was down there with him for a day, and we done the podcast. We went and seen his dogs, and he talked about because he's 65 now, 66, and he's been doing this since he was a little kid. And he's got his own strain of dogs that have some bird dog mixed in them and stuff. And they're just super talented dogs on both coons and squirrels, both. He's won all kinds of squirrel hunts. He's won a world championship or two.
Wow.
But he just talked about, he goes, well, and, we were talking about how he's getting up there. And he talked about the regrets that he had that because he would squirrel hunt all day and coon hunt all night unless he was working. He would work, he would squirrel hunt, he would coon hunt. That's all he did, and that's pretty much still all he does. But he was talking about the regrets he had about the time he missed with his kids and his wife and all that stuff. But that was a fleeting moment in that 7 hours that I was with him that he said that. And he was right back into talking squirrel dogs. I mean, shortly after.
His
And as a
eyes would light up
father,
when he.
yeah, as a father and a husband, I get it. We're out there all night, we're out there all day, and all this stuff. But you know, people are wired different,
Yeah.
and those people that are wired like Keith Sutmiller aren't going to have a lot of cameras in their face unless someone goes out there and shows it to them.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, I've talked to several of these guys that, I said, man, I'd like to come sit down and interview, and they just look at me and say, well,
Yeah,
I'm really not interested in that.
yeah. One good thing about Eastern coon hunters is they love attention. So I've got a plethora of people that I could interview at any time. There's a few, but most of them they like the limelight. They like the
That's,
spotlight. But yeah,
I,
it's such a unique culture, and really, Brett and I haven't spent a lot of time with Western houndsmen, but I've been around them some, and I've been up north and I've been out east, and there's not a lot of difference in the type of human that does that. Whether no matter the game that they choose to pick, are you
yeah, I
seeing
think
about the same thing?
same personality. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were just, just wired different, I guess. I don't know what it is. Uh, yeah, they're just different from the Bobcat hunters, down in South Texas or Oklahoma, and then I'm sure I didn't know much about coon hunting. I ran some raccoons when I lived. I had a farm for a while, and we had a drainage ditch and pecan trees all around. We had quite a few raccoons, and
yeah,
I'd go out and run them. But I didn't know much except from when I was younger and read in Full Cry and this and that. But I didn't pay that much attention to it until I think I was talking to you and listening to the Houndsman XP podcast. I think sometime you're
yeah.
talking about how much money these guys win. It's just like, wow, I just could not. That's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
that
No, I
that's
mean
something else.
there's a chance to win $20,000 or more 50 weeks a year,
Jeez.
at least. And there's $100,000 hunts. They're getting ready to have a hunt down in Texas where the first place winner gets a brand new truck and $100,000.
Golly. That's
But
crazy.
with that,
That's
yeah, with that, there's some sacrifice. Um,
oh, I bet.
the guys with the most money are going to have the best dog. And that's just
Absolutely.
that's the way it's going to be. But also, it gives guys like myself an opportunity to go work for those guys with a lot of money. It gives myself the opportunity to take one of these 4-month-old pups out here that I have in the kennel, get them really good and ready to win, and make a really good price. When I go to sell that dog,
You can
a good
sell him
coon,
for a
a
lot of
good
money.
oh yeah, a good coon dog is going to go from bottom tier winners are going to be 10 grand, and they'll go up all the way to 50, 60, $70,000.
Oh, and I thought it was crazy to spend $20,000 for a lion hound. I seen one
Yeah.
sold
I
for
did see
that, but
that. I was really impressed by that. At that, it was an auction, wasn't it?
yeah, that auction they
Yeah.
have up in
Yeah.
northern New Mexico up here, they sold that dog, and I thought, man, alive, how'd you like to pay $20,000 for a dog and then turn him loose in some of this old rough, bluffy country, And
I,
but they also told me, someone told me because I was, questioning it and everything. How would you go about that? I mean, man, that sucker would be living in the house with me, but they said you can buy insurance for them
mm,
and
yeah.
that it's not that expensive, and
It
I
depends. I know
man,
that because a lot of the insurance on the Eastern Coonhounds, at least when I've had one dog insured, I think, and it was they would insure them for not always what they're worth, but what they had won, and then they'd factor in some of the titles. They had a whole thing in there, but I think I had dollar insured for I don't know $7,000, $8,000, but he was probably at that time a $15,000 dog.
yeah,
So I mean but it helps.
sure.
It's better than nothing. But these guys, I think of a dog like Laura Lee that I think I'm wanting to say Ryan paid 20,000 for her, and luckily he had her long enough to win his money back and then some. I think she won around 80 or $90,000 in the short time that he had her. But 8 months after he buys her, she's dead. She gets hurt in a hunting accident, and they can't save her.
She's good. Did
I
they
mean,
did they win
it's a
any money
risky
with
take.
her? Did you say
Yeah,
or
yeah, he got his money back in winnings and stuff, but
yeah,
a lot of that was just they take a big risk with these dogs every time they turn them
yeah,
loose, and out east, especially in Ohio, Indiana, Louisiana, not so much Louisiana, but Kentucky, Tennessee. There's a lot of houses now and a lot of roads
a
and a
lot
lot of
of highways.
traffic, and so you're turning a hard going dog that's going to be a couple miles from you at some point in the night, and there's a big risk. You know, a lot of them get run over. I think of some really great ones that got killed on the road.
No
Melvin got
kidding.
killed on the road, and a few others. So I mean, it's risk they take, but
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you turn
none of
them,
mine are good enough to ever get run over.
even in this country, I got a good story about Mike Root. I talked about him earlier. He was
Yeah.
uh, he's another character. I mean, he's a neat guy, and I got to interview him. And when I was back in the early '80s, I heard about him, and I went up there in his yard. And of course, he was gone in the mountains hunting, and his wife was there. And I never will forget. There was a whole litter of a bunch of little white walkers running all around the yard, and I'd gave my eye teeth had one of those pups, and I asked the lady, and she said, "Oh no, he doesn't sell puppies to anybody. He won't. He just soon something happened to him is sell them to somebody." I said, "All right." And I bet I didn't talk to Mike again. And then here it was about 5 years ago, or right before I interviewed him, 5 or 6 years ago, I got a phone call from him. He said, "Hey, I got a couple puppies here for you if you want them." And
Mhm.
but I lost. I ended up losing one of those pups to
Yeah.
a bear off a bluff, way
Yeah.
back in some rough country. But anyway, you never know when you put them on the ground, you turn them loose. They might not come home with you that day.
Dogs are in less danger than because I mean, one mean bear, or one cat that turned, and the terrain that you guys have is probably more dangerous than the quarry you're hunting, I assume.
Oh yeah, the bluffs. The
Yeah.
bluffs is what gets them.
Yeah.
I mean,
But no,
it's for lions. I mean,
yeah. No, it's
in the
go ahead.
I lost one dog to a bear, but we started out on a lion, and we tried lion
Yeah.
up, and dogs pulled off. There was a bear in a cave hole that was in the wintertime, and then that bear had been in there sleeping, I guess, and they woke him up, and I didn't know it. And when we got there, we couldn't figure out what was going on. I seen the dogs going over the top of the hill, and I heard them, and then I remember hearing something, and I thought that didn't sound good, and looked at the Garmin, and Missy was just still up there. And we were in a hurry because we had some other dogs going, and we thought we had the lion jumped. And I didn't put it all together until later that it was a bear because some strange things happened. There was a tree there and a bluff and a cave hole. But some of the dogs were still there, and some of the dogs had took off.
Yeah.
And when I finally got up there to where Missy was, she was laid across a bush, but she had blood coming out of her nose, and of course, she was dead. And at first, I just thought, well, the lion had got her or something. They caught that lion on the ground. But then we couldn't find a track or anything. Booger and them went on over the hill. They never did stop it. But looking back on it now, what happened is there was a bear in that cave hole, and some of those dogs pulled up, and some of those other dogs didn't care anything about running bears, so they just stopped right there. They didn't want to they didn't want to run that bear. And he turned around. She always thought she was a little tougher than she was, and she was real fast, and she probably got up on him, and he swatted her and broke her neck.
What when it comes to that, do you want a dog that's a little bit not that doesn't think it's too tough? Do you want a
Yes,
dog that's going to stay back?
yes, I do. I
Yeah.
do. I don't want them getting down. And that's the worst thing if you watch some of my videos, when you get there to them, they might have a line out on the bluff, and Booger is notorious for it. He'll stay back, he'll stay back and bay them, and everything. But when you start getting close, he wants to get down next to him. And yeah, when you're on one of those big old bluffs, it's always scary. And that's where they get killed. They get knocked off or they slip, and fall.
What's the scariest thing that's happened to you personally, not just your dogs, but when you're up there on them bluffs and you're trying to get your dogs back, or you're trying to, I assume that's why they all got to have a pretty good handle. You know, they got to
Yeah,
come when you call them and all that stuff.
I gotta call him. I gotta be able to call him back.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm trying to think of when I've been scared. I,
Or is it just another day in the office for Brett
I,
Vaughn
you know,
climbing
I
on
don't,
bluffs
I
and getting
don't,
the cats?
I get scared for the dogs. I trying to think of myself. This morning I was up there in those bluffs, and I thought, well, I can just sit down on my hind end and slide down this little thing, and it was a little too steep for that. It could have been worse than it was. And I'm getting a little old, those
Yeah.
just getting up and down is a little painful now. I'm
What
62, so
What about the mules? When did you start? When did you decide that mules were the way to go when
Another
you're
one,
chasing them lions?
another one of those influences from somebody because I competitively team roped for a while and I mean at a high level, and
Yeah.
I was hunting. I was lion hunting on a friend of mine's ranch, and he roped and his boy roped and he and real knowledgeable guy. They've been ranching in that country forever. And I was out there and I was riding one of my a young roping horse, and it's a pretty valuable horse and out there running it, in that rock and stuff. And he said, "Oh, he said, you got old Googles out here." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man," he said, "if I hunted the way you did," he said, "I'd get a mule." And I never will forget, he looked at me right in the eye and he said, "And get a good mule. In other words, don't mess around with a bad mule." And and that's kind of another strange story about that deal is of course I didn't have any money or anything to go buy a mule at that time. And there was a company who owed me a bunch of money. They had owed me like $50,000 for 3 years. And David Heiss called me and had told me, he said, "Hey, there's a guy going through a divorce and his wife's selling his mules." He said, "You can get
That's
them
the
pretty
best time
good."
to buy.
Yeah, he said, "You can get a pretty good buy on them. And I told my wife, I said, "Man, I'd like to have those mules, but man, I just don't have enough money right now." I said, "If those people pay me that owe me, when they pay me," I said, "I'll go buy those mules." And that day I checked the mail and I had a $50,000 check in the mail. Of
No
course,
kidding.
most of it was already owed, but I pulled $3,500 out of it and I went and bought those two mules. And I rode lots of horses. I was raised on a quarter horse ranch. My dad, we broke colts and I trained horses. I trained roping horses and stuff. And but when I got those mules, I might as well had two camels out there. I didn't, they are different than horses. And
Mm.
I got where I like them. They're a good tool for what we do. They're tough. Gosh almighty, they're tough. And as long as you're on their back, for the most part, you're pretty safe.
I I got a lot of friends that coon hunt off mules, or used to. It used to be a big deal around my
Hmm.
county. Everybody that hunted usually had a mule too. And that
Hmm.
was, of course, before the invention of side by sides. And, now they can get a new Polaris General with heat and air and all that stuff and drive it to every tree. They don't want that mule anymore. But there's still some guys that ride them, and it was a big deal. My brother, he's a team roper too. He's got a big arena up here just not too far from me. And he had mules at one time. And I never had one inkling to get on the back of one of them things. I've never liked horses. I've never liked mules. I thought if I fall and break a leg, I want it to be my fault. I don't want it to be an animal's fault. But I can see, especially in mountain country or rough country and them bluffs and stuff, where they gotta save you some steps and they gotta make it easier on you, surely.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and I was, because my good mule just died
Yeah, I seen that.
here a few days ago, and like this morning when I was trying to follow those dogs, and I was going up that canyon, and I thought, man, well, of course, I was going right with the dogs, but I thought, well, if I had my mule, what would I do? And then you could ride around and hit a little easier spot to go up and intercept the dogs or get up there where you think they're going and be a lot easier, and you don't mind making that mule do that. But if you had to walk around like I did, you might think twice about it.
What what do you got for mules now? Now that you lost your good one?
I got a I got a mule out there that I got my old Jet Johnson mule. I rode him for years, but he's on retirement. And then I've got a mule that I had packed, and she's supposed to be broke to ride, but she's always been a little looky, I call it. They're just kind of boogery. And so all I did was pack her. I haven't rode her. I might go ahead and start riding her. Man, there's a mule up north that I would give my eye teeth for. I mean, this mule, you could go to a jackpot team roping and rope on him. I mean, he's
Really?
fast and he handles, he sits on his hind end, he turns around nice. And then they have video of them shooting between his ears, and he's packed out lots of hogs. They hunted hogs, and the little grandkids, 3 or 4 year old kids riding him around and then walking between his legs. And I mean, this is a nice mule. But the guy paid $26,000 for this
Yeah.
mule. And he said, "I'll take a little bit of a loss, but not much." So I don't know. thinking, how in the world can I make me $20,000?
Well, I'll tell you what, you just get you a good coon dog. You come out here and pay an entry fee, you can get it, you get it in one weekend.
I got a feeling those good coon hunters would laugh at me if I showed up.
You'd be surprised. I think you'd actually fit in pretty well, Brett. And the thing is, you go to some of these hunts anymore, and we're out in a fancy steakhouse, and they pull up in $100,000 trucks and stuff. But even the guys that have been successful in their lives, they usually all started out the same place. They all started
Yeah.
out in a trailer park or out in the woods somewhere and didn't have much money or nothing, just like we did. And then all of a sudden they get some success, but that inner houndsman never leaves them. And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes, these lion guys and the coon hunters so similar.
Oh
They
yeah.
get it in their blood and they can't get away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I couldn't believe how much money they hunt for. And then I started listening, pay attention, how they run the competitions and how, the casts and yeah, calling your dog treed and circle points. Is that something that I
Well,
heard
yeah.
right?
Yep. Circle
And all that
point.
stuff. I have no idea what all that means, but I started paying a lot more attention. And now, used to when I'd hear, a podcast and they were going to be talking, coon hunting or something, I wasn't really that interested in it. But now, man, I listened to it and I thought, man, this is interesting.
Well, that's one positive of all the money coming into the sport is it gets people's attention. It really
Sure.
does and brings it to it. And squirrel hunting's getting the same way.
Is it
They have
really?
they have truck hunts for squirrel dogs. They have I think the JPI, the Calcutta, raised like 30 some $1,000 or something crazy like that. I mean, they have huge squirrel hunts now.
That
And
would
it's
that
just
would
been it's kind of following the route that the coon hunters took.
I was going to say that would suit me probably a little bit better because that happens during the daytime, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but they don't bark on the ground much. And that
Oh,
never did. They'll just fall treed and they'll have a
really?
squirrel most of the time. And yeah, I mean, I like it. It's cool to do, but I actually, one of my walker dogs out here, well, he's actually laying in bed with me or laying in the living room with me right now. But he just bred a brindle cur female that we're going to try to make squirrel dogs out of. A neighbor guy had a squirrel tree and cur dog, and he wanted to make coon hounds. He wanted something he could hunt coons with at night too. So he brought it over here to my male walker. And I told him I'd breed for a pup, and I'm going to find. I talked to one of my buddies in Louisiana that's a big squirrel hunter, and I said, "Will you raise it and train it and get it to where it can win in a hunt, and then I'll just go handle it." I said, because
There you
that's
go.
about as much squirrel hunting as I want to do. And I said, we'll partner on it. I'll pay the entry fees and then I'll go handle the dog. I said, if it ain't no good, it ain't no good. And we can just make it a pleasure dog or something. But I don't have any, they don't bark on the ground.
You like that
You
trailing?
I like to hear a dog trail, and
Yeah.
I like silent dogs in a cast, because they don't draw a lot of attention to you and they're good about being alone. They're always by themselves. It's easier for them to be by themselves. But when I'm pleasure hunting and I'm out for fun, I want something I can hear, something that's
Yeah.
open trailing and moving a good track. That's probably the funnest part to me.
That's like cold trailing a lion. I mean, that's just to just watch those dogs work and trail and and it's a real slow pace. I mean,
Yeah,
it's nothing real fast. And then and then you have that loose and those dogs are working and they're going and then like Al runs up there ahead, and he's working. He hits it way up there, ball, and then they all
yeah.
go to him, and then it's just I don't know. It's fun. Then you find that big old lion track, and oh man, we're going the right way, and
Mm.
it's exciting.
Do you still get your blood pumping on a good line track just like you did when you first started?
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
caught that many lions. Not like a lot of these guys, but yeah, like I got a video. Matter of fact, I'll have a video coming out this afternoon.
Yeah.
And really the video is about me packing my nephew into some remote country. He drew a deer tag for a unit matter of fact, it's a unit where I used to live up there. And so I just this was before my mule died, and I was packing one mule and riding another mule, and I camp, and then I go up there and I set up a canvas tent and everything for him, and there was some snow on the north slopes. And I had some young dogs with me, and I had my old dog P with me. And coming out after I'd set up the tent and everything, I was coming out, riding down that same trail that we went in, and on that north slope, man, I watched P, and P was whipping her tail, and pretty soon she started opening. And I thought, I'll be dang, I thought, in the middle of the day like that, I don't know. I just assumed, I said, oh, she's foxing on me. And then the young dogs, I had Iris there, and she was whipping her tail, and she's pretty silent, but she went up ahead and she opened up a few times, and I'm just riding down the trail, and I look down, there's the biggest Tom Lion track I ever seen coming in right over the top of my tracks. So that big sucker knew I
Yeah.
was in there. He was walking over
Yeah.
my tracks. He was probably curious. Of course, we were going backwards on him, and it was too late in the afternoon, too rough a country, for us to turn around and go try to get him caught. So I called Mike, and because that's what he does. He guides hunters for a living, and I asked him. I said, "Do you have any clients in?" I said, because there's a big Tom Lion, as big a track as I've ever seen going in. I gave directions to where it was, and he said, "Oh," he said, "that's over there in that bluffy, rough country off of East Curtis Canyon, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well," he said, "you better take two tortillas and a big jar of peanut butter if you're going into that country." He said, "because that's pretty rough." I said, "I know." I said, "I've been in there." I said, "I'm not going. I thought you might want to." He said, "Oh," he said, I might take these guys somewhere else."
Yeah. What constitutes rough country out there? I mean, what's the difference between good country and rough country?
Probably in my opinion, is they don't work the trails in that country. If they work the trails, and there's enough, that people have been riding that country forever. And if somebody could go in there and work the trails, of course, it's all designated wilderness, so you got to do it all
Right.
by hand, and you can't take a chainsaw or anything in there. And if you work the trails, it probably wouldn't be that bad. I mean, it's bluffy country, and all the advantage goes to the lion when you get in there, because they can go through those bluffs, and your
Yeah.
dogs get hung up and everything. But and then you can't. There's not like you hit a road, or you're in, like if you're in your buggy and you hit a road, you say, "Ah, those dogs are heading over there. We'll just drive around and get over here closer to them." Well, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you got to be on a mule or be in really, really good shape, and carry your backpack and stuff with you, because once you go in, you go in 5 or 6 miles, and then or further than that, you might end up having to stay. And I've had to, lay out back in that country before, 3 or 4 times. And you better have your stuff with you. That's one of the reasons I
Yeah.
started taking a pack mule often, is just to carry some supplies, in case you have to lay out.
What about what are you looking for? Because it's such a different. My game's so much different than yours. Ours is about speed.
Hmm.
We don't speed and accuracy. They
Hmm.
got to be quick. They got to be accurate. And we're turning loose. We're the game that we're hunting. We're going to have tracks pretty easy. But our dogs are super independent. Um, they're bred to be alone and they're trained to be alone. And so we don't want them cold trailing nothing. If
Yeah.
it's not a track that they can't finish in a hurry, then they don't need to be messing with it. As a matter of fact, when they're young, we will push them off them bad tracks. We don't want
Hmm.
them messing around with the bag trap because we're on the clock. But your dogs, they have to really grind it out in that dry ground country. And so, what's something that you're looking at other than, we hear cold nose, hot nose, all that stuff, but a dog's got to have a certain mindset to do what you're doing. And how do you recognize that?
Well, and I think that's a big debate that we've had. A buddy of mine is Cody King, and he catches, he'll catch 100 bobcats a year down in South Texas. But he's got a friend of his, and Cody's caught some lions too. He's got a friend of his that, of course, and they're using running walkers. And
Yep.
the big thing that the old time dry ground lion hunters say, well, they don't have a nose. They don't have enough nose to hunt lions in this country. But then they say, that Cody has a friend that's kind of switched from bobcats and runs lions all the time now. And he runs in, some pretty desolate, dry country, and he catches a lot of lions. And he said that, those dogs develop more of a nose when they're allowed to, when they have to. The desire to catch, and the desire to hunt. allows them to develop a better nose. But then you'll talk to, I got friends and I got, good hunting friends that say, no, it's genetics. You got to have those genetics for those dogs to have that cold nose. And there's a lot of these guys, those Southern Arizona lion hunters, they didn't ever want to let those dogs out that had that, that
Yeah.
had that old cold nose, trail a 2-day old track through the dirt. They didn't want to let them out. They wanted to keep them all to themselves because they believe that that's and I'm kind of in between. I don't know. I don't know what's true and what's not. I think if you had a really good lion population, if the density was great, then you'd want a hotter nosed dog and have a fast walking mule and just cover the country until you hit that hot track. And if that's all you want to do is catch lions. But if I love to watch a dog cold trail. I like a cold nose. I mean, I trailed lion up here one time and we trailed through a game camera I had, and I went back and checked the picture after I didn't have a way to read the picture. Then when we went through there, and I was 2 days behind that lion, and I was more tickled with that than I was if I'd have caught the lion. And I trailed all day long. I trailed all day long on that lion, and I thought, golly, that is something. Now, if I'd had enough dog power, and I could have. At that time I was still running my business and could have gone back the next day and hit that track again. I mean, I that would be so much fun to me is to hit a track hit that, stay on the same lion until you could get him caught.
Yeah.
3 or 4 days. To me, that would be like the ultimate. And that's what those old timers used to do. They'd get on a lion, they'd just stay on them. And of course, we all hear the stories about Ben Lilly and stuff like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
how he could do it. And that to me, that takes a cold nosed dog, a dog who really wants to work a track. And but if you want to kill lions, just kill lions. I think maybe, and you're in the right kind of country, maybe a hotter nosed dog is better.
How many? Because I know in all dog sports and through Joy Dog Food, of course, and all the working dogs that I've been around and been with, because I love to waterfowl hunt. I've had retrievers. I love upland hunting. Love it.
Mhm.
Um, I had English setters for a long time along with my hounds. But most everybody I know with working dogs doesn't really care if they're killing anything. It's not about taking the game. It's
Mhm.
about the dogs and you molding that animal into something that pleases you, not necessarily that pleases everybody else. But I don't know if my ADD, I think that walkers have the same problem I have, is we all have ADD.
You're hot nosed.
Yes, we're all hot nosed. But it's just such a different game. And you just talked about how what pleases you is getting that track and grubbing that old cold track up and watching those dogs work. Whereas, somebody else, wants to catch a bunch of lions, wants to see not necessarily just to kill them, but just wants to tree a bunch of lions and see that, put them numbers on the board, or a guy like me that wants to tree 10 coons per hour instead of, the one that my dogs have been treeing here lately. So I think maybe our dogs mimic. Um, I don't think it's an ability thing. Yes, some dogs are naturally blessed with more ability than others, but
Mhm.
I think they're just gonna mimic what we want, if we do it right.
Well, and I think this is something me and another guy were discussing the other day, and I called him up and I said, uh, I think these great lion hounds that we all hear about and some people have, I think as much dry ground dogs, especially as much as anything, is they have a big brain. They're real
Yeah.
smart.
Now, I
You
don't think
know,
it's anything to do with the ability to smell anything. I think it's more to do with the ability to decipher
yeah,
what they're smelling.
yeah.
And that's
I've
my
got a
theory. I may be wrong too.
I got a female in I think they know what you want. They feel what you want. And like I have this female dog and I almost ruined her when she was young. And she came from Larry Hendricks. She's Larry Hendricks bred dog, famous dry ground lion hunter out here, that's was known for good dogs, really good
Yeah.
lion hounds. And that dog, I got video of it. I tell her, go get in her pen. We come in, I say, go get in. And she'd go around and go down the alley and her pen would be latched shut. She opened the latch and get in her pen on her own. I mean, that to me, that's for no hound, that to me, that's smart. That's a real biddable dog, wants to listen to you. And you get a dog like that, has a brain like that, and you go out there and you show them lion tracks and you get that excitement when you see that lion track and they're working a track and then they feel that excitement. And I think they just try that much harder.
Yeah. Do you think, and my theory has always been the amount of time we spend with them is going to equate to the brains that they have,
Yep.
but not necessarily just hunting, just being around them. You
Just
look at
yes.
this dog laying here next to me has probably got 250,000 miles on him just in the back of the truck. And he knows what I want. Now, sometimes he don't have the ability to do what I want,
Yeah.
but these dogs, I think they're way smarter than we give them credit for,
Yeah.
and you're not going to see that until you spend just hours upon hours and months and months and months and years with them.
Yeah. And lots of miles. I remember when I was living up there on the mountain, we'd go out all day long and, it'd get to be, we'd stop to eat lunch and, 1 o'clock or so, I'd decide I wanted to take a nap and I'd lean up against a tree and, and all those dogs, I might have 8 hound dogs with me and they'd all curl up all around me and they take a nap too, and pretty soon I hear Solo over there messing around. It's time to get up and go. He said, that's enough nap time. We're going to go hunt now. Yeah, we just go through the now. Sometimes they have their own agenda, and you kind of gotta convince
But
them
they
that,
know they're not supposed to usually. Mine
yeah,
always just decide that, I know dad's not going to like this, but
yeah,
I'm doing it anyway. And the repercussions are worth the reward that I'm going to get out of this thing that I'm not supposed to be doing.
well, speaking of Solo, he's a daddy of a bunch of he sired a bunch of good dogs,
Yeah.
and you'd leave in the morning, man, he'd be a broke sucker. You were across Javelina and Coyote and everything. He went in a trail, and we were looking for a lion track. Then you'd be coming back in the afternoon, it'd be getting pretty late, be dark in about an hour and you're tired. I'd be riding my mule down through there and I'd have all those other dogs around me and I'd look and I say, where is Solo? And all of a sudden you hear him up a side canyon up there. Roar. He'd go find something to trail. But that's just the way he was.
Well, Brett, what do you got in store for not just the YouTube channel, but you? Yeah, I know it's lion time right down there right now. You're hunting. You were hunting this morning when I talked to you. What's in for the future of Brett Vaughn?
Yeah, of course I got to find me a mule. I want to hunt as much as I can. I'm 62 and I sold my business. I'm retired. I had some health issues this year. I think that all comes from retiring. It's just like
Yeah.
it was some stress or something. I don't know, but I feel good and they got a clean bill of health. Uh, I want to hunt, and then I want to continue with. Of course, we do our little. We started out doing a little live deal. Matter of fact, you came on one time
I did.
on
Yep.
on Monday nights, and
Yep.
it started out with me and just Chris Watson. He has Antidote of a Houndsman YouTube channel, and then George Lambert, big time
Yep.
uh, bear hunter down in Virginia.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
another guy, John, he's a preacher. He loves hounds and stuff. And he come on with, and they all had YouTube channels. And we would get on, and we weren't even going live there for a long time. We would just get on. I got that little program, and we'd get on and just discuss. And I'd try to help them with what I've learned through YouTube. How to make your channel better and this and that. And
Yeah.
one night we said, oh, we ought to just go live. So we started going live on Monday nights, and one thing led to another, and now we've had Cody King on, we got Benny Griffin on. He's old time dry ground lion hunter, and I had Otis Llewellyn on one time. I want to get him back on, and so we started recording those and going live on YouTube, and then W Hunting Supply is gonna rebroadcast them on their podcast. I think they are if they
Yeah.
like them. I
Yeah.
talked to Buddy and we kind of made a deal, and then I got uh, some guys that I've talked to and recorded that I will share on the podcast that I haven't shared yet. Like Warner Glenn, I went down, and then John Clump, I did part of his. I got to go back and finish up with him. And I got some other guys I want to go talk to, and those are all the old houndsmen. That's kind of my passion, is talk to those guys, and
Yeah.
and that'll all be on. on my YouTube channel and then also on W Hunting Supplies podcast. And my Born 100 Years Too Late, that's still going to be me riding around on my mule, going to these destinations, you know. And I got, there's also another thing that fascinates me is taking some of these, what long rides they call them, you know, go on my mule and take a pack mule. And I want to ride the Butterfield Trail through New Mexico, probably take me about 7 or 8 days and different trails, different places, you know, and go spend, you know, 5 or 6 days out like they did back in the old days. Like if I was born 100 years ago.
Well, it's a perfect name for your YouTube channel, Brett. And I think I've talked to you about that before whenever we spoke in the past. But yeah, you nailed that. That was it. Because there's a few, and I wouldn't say 100 years too late. I'm maybe 30 or 40 years too late. I still want air conditioning and all that other stuff.
You don't want to
But
get on a mule.
no, I'm not riding no mule. And that's one thing, you know, because I've got open invitations to go lion hunting up in Montana and Wyoming. And I was supposed to leave to go hunt with Shorty today.
Oh,
But
good.
I'm going to leave. I think I'm going to leave on Sunday. Now our weather came in. I don't want to leave the dogs in the house when it's 20 below zero and there's 2 foot of snow on
Sure.
the ground. But one of the things that prevented me from going to the mother is like, look, dude, I ain't riding no horse. I stay in pretty good shape. I can walk. Oh, you can't walk in this. You can't walk in this. I said, well, I'll walk and die of frostbite in Montana before I'll get on the back of that horse.
It's not for everybody, I guess.
No, no, it's definitely not for me. I think I still have some kind of issues from when I was little because my brother's a team roper and has been for a long time, and he's
Yeah.
always loved horses. And I was
Yeah.
raised around horses, but he built me a chute one time when I was 6
Oh,
out of
wow.
an old washing machine box, and then I would run out of it. He's 6 years older than me, and I would run out of it. He would rope me and drag me around the yard a little bit, and if I didn't do it, he'd beat me up. And so, you know, nobody was there to stop him at the time. I knew it was a couple hours before grandma got home and was going to make him quit. And I've never been on a horse since or around one. So
Oh, wow.
maybe that was what cured me.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of, well, my plans are keep making my videos. You know,
Yeah.
I got a, I got another story about something that happened. My wife, she's kind of she writes poems. She's always wrote all these poems for a long time. And she just writes them, puts them in a drawer. And she wrote one for me one time. And I told my wife, Tammy, I said, Tammy, this is really good. This is real good. And I was listening to Clay Newcomb's podcast, The Render, Bear Grease Render, I guess they
Hmm.
call it. And there was a guy on there named Hayden Powell, and Hayden has a YouTube channel, and he comments on my videos, and then I've commented on his videos. And this guy is a musician. I mean, a heck of a musician.
Yeah.
And he sang a song on Clay's podcast and can play the guitar and come to find out he spent, you know, like a year in Nashville or something, kind of a big time. So I sent him a message right away. I said, man, I must have been living under a rock. I didn't know you were a musician. I said, I know you write your own songs, but would you consider putting music to someone else's lyrics? And he said, sure, I'll look at it. And I sent him that poem my wife wrote me. And he wrote me back right away. And he said, man, this thing is good. He said, and he's put it to music. And I mean, I played it at the house. I
Yeah.
turned it to everybody, and everybody got choked up. I mean, everybody just, including me, I couldn't believe it. It sounded so good. So I was just going to tell everybody in the podcast world, what listen for it because him and I are gonna he had his band come in, he did a studio deal with it and got it
That's
all
awesome.
professional. And we're gonna make some kind of, well, I think if I have to load up my mules and go to Arkansas and him and I are gonna make a music video and use that and use that song. So
I can just see Brett Vaughn walking into the Country Music Awards right now with wife in hand.
I'll send her. I think I'll stay outside.
They may not let you in anyway.
That's what I asked Hayden. I said, we're going to make a music video. I said, I know you can play the guitar and I know you can sing, but can you act? And he said, well, I was in Nashville for a year and I had to act like I was happy. So,
Yeah. Brett, I appreciate you coming on here. Why don't you
Oh,
tell
you bet.
everybody exactly all your YouTube channels and all that stuff, how they can get a hold of you if they want to, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the born 100 years too late. That's, me on a mule and a bunch of hounds, usually riding through the desert or through the hills somewhere. And then I have the interview stories and tales is kind of TAILS. And that's where we go live on Monday nights. And also I have these interviews that I've done of the older. I like to talk to these older houndsmen or older guys who've kind of lived a unique life, and that's it. And then of course everything on it will be available through the W Hunt and Supply podcast. So that's enough.
Right. I
That's
appreciate you, Brett.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna check that live stream out tonight. Now that I'm snowed in on a Monday night, usually I'm hunting about that time this time of year, but
There you
weather's
go.
so bad here. I'll check the live stream out tonight. I know we're recording this on a Monday, so but yeah, everybody,
Perfect.
you're gonna love Born 100 years too late and the tales. That's personally my favorite. I like watching them old guys,
Sure.
even though I don't know nothing about lion hunting. And sometimes you had that one coon hunter that you sent me. That was really good. That was interesting that you sent me that video. But there's some really good stuff on that. So everybody go
Cool.
check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate you
Yep.
letting me come on.
Yep, Brett. I appreciate you being here. You guys, thanks for joining us. This is the Fueled by Joy Working Dog Podcast. This is Josh Michaelis, and we will see you next week.